This is Talk is Sheep, a podcast by the Wild Sheep Society of British Columbia. Come along as we take conversations that matter to you into the high alpine.
Good morning, sir. It was great seeing you this past weekend in lovely Prince George.
I guess lovely's a relative term, I suppose, right? At least the weather was okay.
Oh, it was a great trip. So, we were up there. We had our horn aging event in Prince George this past weekend. We sold out. We absolutely packed Trench Brewery, and it was just such a great weekend. We had so much fun. We had a ton of members there, and it was just so good to be together, talking about wild sheep, talking horn aging, seeing the new film transmission. Mm-hmm. How was the weekend for you? How'd you find the event?
It was a long day on Saturday, but it was worth it. The beer was awesome. The company was great. Food was amazing. Yeah, it was good to finally get together in person to BS and talk about all things wild sheep and get together with a bunch of like-minded people that truly care.
Yeah, it was really cool. And so let's talk about the beer. So we got a brand new beer release. So Trench Brewery, thanks, hats off to Jesse and Craig and Bailey over at Trench there for supporting us on this. So we're doing a conservation series beer. We're going to do all 4 subspecies in BC. And we started off with the California Common. It's a California Bighorn lager, beautiful beer. The label is exquisite. It's something, it's gorgeous, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a play on our very own Secretary Greg Rensmag's photo. It's awesome. The artwork is just phenomenal, and the beer matches it.
It is. I don't drink a ton of beer, but that's exactly the beer that I drink when I do. So I picked up an 8-pack, and I'm just trying to figure a way to get it to the island here. So I'm going to see if we can set it up with Trench and get some sort of delivery, because I'm pretty sure, we could probably sell a crate of it here. There'd be guys take several flats of it. But it's super easy drinking. Trench, it's interesting. Mike Selden, our VP, he drinks that stuff exclusively. He's like, man, that's my favorite beer. He goes, they're a microbrewery in Prince George there. They do a great job and just loves it. And I have to admit, that was my first experience with them and loved it as well. So, yeah.
Oh, for those in the north, you can get it at liquor stores in Dawson, Fort St. James. You can get it out around Vanderhoof, Smithers. Got some spots in Kamloops, some spots in Kelowna, Vernon, Penticton, Williams Lake, all over the place. You can get it, except the island for now, but I think you're going to work on changing that.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do. I actually don't know that they've actually got that. They've got it out in the liquor stores yet, because they literally released it last week. So don't go in just yet with the full expectation. Sure, go in and check, but don't. If it's not there, don't get angry. But they are working on distribution now. Here's the interesting part: for every 4-pack that you buy, $1 comes back to Wild Sheep Society of BC. So this is a conservation series beer. So we get $1 back, and we're going to put that on the ground for wild sheep conservation in the province. So pretty cool organization that they're supporting us to that level. And we're going to do 4 of these beers. We've got one, we're already working on this fall's beer as well that we're hoping to release in November. So really, really exciting.
Yeah, those locations I mentioned are places you can get Trench beer. So go in there, and because they're shipping there, you can ask for it if they don't have it, and I'm sure they would get it down to you.
Awesome. I do believe you can buy stuff online. They have through their website, you can purchase it as well. So if you're really keen to get it, obviously there's a shipping charge involved with that. But if somebody's really keen on getting it, like I said, I'm going to work with the owners and see if we can get something down here. And it might just be a scenario where I end up with a crate of it in my driveway, and you might have to come by. But it's just that good. It's definitely worth it. So cool. All right. So this is a great episode 52, Helen Schwantje.
Helen's
72. Just seeing if you're paying attention.
72.
Yeah, thanks. You only told me that 3 times before we started recording. So Helen Schwantje, she is the retired provincial wildlife veterinarian for the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. Glad I don't have to say that anymore. And Helen has been really involved with the Wild Sheep Society of BC. She's got a keen interest in bighorn sheep and sheep in general. She also sits on the Professional Reliance Advisory Board for the Wild Sheep Foundation. She's a member of the Wild Sheep Society of BC, and she's just been a stalwart for wild sheep within the province. Ever since I've been at the table, Helen's been involved, and she's been doing it literally for decades. Just such an authority on wild sheep.
Oh, she's so much fun to talk to. I got to meet her for the first time down in Reno in 2020 before shit went sideways, and just an absolute wealth of knowledge. And she talks to you in a way you'll understand. It's not scientific to the point where you go, "What? My head's spinning." It's all relatable, and she's very, very real in her approach. And we got to watch Transmission. I got to watch it for the second or third time this past weekend, and Helen is a superstar in that. And the first couple of minutes of it, her delivery will grab you. So, and she does the same sort of thing here in the podcast, and I'm just so thankful that she's able to give us an hour of her time.
Yeah, that's the one thing with Helen is I honestly, of all the people I talk to around the wild sheep world, and she probably has the most respect of anyone I know. That people just respect what she has done throughout her career, and her, her knowledge and acumen and leadership. It's unmatched and unparalleled. There's not too many people that stand out more than Helen. And you just talk to anyone, and it's just a consistent theme. People just look to her as the go-to because she just is. She's a force for wildlife. She's a force for wild sheep. She's so knowledgeable and has such a level of respect that it's really unparalleled. So this is a great podcast. We talk lots about the Fraser River project, the Wild Sheep Society BC's involved in, and we just try and get a better understanding a little bit about Movi and what's involved. And it's a really cool talk with Helen. We had to cut it off because we could just sit there and talk literally 3 hours. We'll definitely have her back in the fall and talk more about wild sheep because there's so much more that we couldn't even get into. So on a housekeeping end of things, we've got really 5 cool raffles on the go right now. So we've got our Dall sheep hunt in the Yukon. That's well on its way to selling out. So I wouldn't recommend you wait around too much longer. We're not drawing it till August, but it's going to sell out prior to that. And then we currently have 4 other raffles on our website. So if you just go to our homepage and click on the raffles link, we've got a Coeur d'Alene RMR rifle raffle that we literally just posted last night. It's a beautiful setup from Coeur d'Alene Sporting Goods. $50 a ticket. It's an $8,400 rig, and it's absolutely just stunning. 270 WSM, beautiful setup. And then we also have our big bore rifle series. We posted that this week, and it is gone. It'll sell out today, I think. Just another Don Lynham lineup rifle, stunning rifle. $7,000 package, beautiful. Him and Gary put this thing together, and it's absolutely stunning. 6.5 PRC, so it's a pretty popular sheep rifle. I run that caliber as well, and it's going to sell out shortly. And then we also have our conservation partner, Stone Glacier's got that gear and apparel raffle, beautiful setup there. So I definitely want to pick up one of those tickets. And then we've got a really cool Zeiss optics package. We've got rangefinder, binos, spotter, and a rifle scope. It's a not $8,700 package, so we got tickets selling on that too. So lots of places to put your money. And Steve, why should they be buying these? Because they can win cool stuff, or why else?
Because we put our money where our mouth is. We put over $318,000 on the ground last year because of raffles and fundraisers like this. So if you're looking to make an impact on the ground and you don't have a couple hours to actually get out and take part, a $50 ticket actually makes a difference. It's a way of giving back quick and easy. So don't forget the Dall sheep hunt. We got that as well, and our membership raffle or our membership drive. So become a member, spend a few bucks, and get a chance to actually give back to an organization that gives back.
Yeah, let's do this. For our listeners, anyone that's not a member, anyone that upgrades, that listens to this podcast, and that upgrades, send us an email if you buy a membership or upgrade, and send us an email, and we'll run this for the next month. We'll announce it for the next 4 podcasts. So let's do it till the end of May, and let's give away our new hat and new t-shirt. So we got a leather patch hat, and we got a new Stone Sheep t-shirt. Really cool. We'll put you in a special draw for that. So from this podcast only. So just send us an email once you've upgraded, so you can get in on this cool membership drive. It's a sturgeon fishing trip on the Fraser River. Absolutely great day out. There's 3 levels of prizes, but the grand prize is that's underwritten by Wood Wheaton Super Center. Thanks to them for sponsoring us on that. Get a ticket buy a membership. Let us know. Email us. We'll put your name in a drawing. You can have pretty good odds because there's not going to be thousands of people in this one. there's going to be a handful of people. So let us know, but you got to send us an email saying, yeah, I upgraded today, or I bought a membership. I'm challenging everyone that's listening to the podcast. We're giving you this. We're putting sheep on the mountain. Let's do our best to give back. Buy a membership. You get something out of it, and plus you get your name in for 2 chances to win. Actually, 4 chances to win. There's 3 chances to win on the membership drive, and then plus the hat and shirt as well. So episode, did we say 52? Okay, just kidding. 72. Dr. Helen Schwantje. Enjoy.
If you looked up the words conservation superhero in the dictionary, you would see a picture of our friend Omer from Precision Optics. A tireless donor and supporter of all things wild sheep, Precision Optics, located in Quesnel, British Columbia, truly stands alone in the high alpine. From optics to rifles to outdoor gear and a knowledge that cannot be surpassed, toss in that killer smile and you have a total conservation package. Precision Optics, we are truly thankful for the support you show us every step of the way. Find them online at precisionoptics.net or in Aroma Foods, located just off Highway 97 in Quesnel, BC.
Well, Helen, welcome to the show, and thank you. I've been working on this for months/years to get you on a call, and I know you're always, oh yeah, but here we are finally. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It's really good to see your faces and have a chance to talk.
Awesome. So there's so much I want to cover today, Helen, and I've had the luxury of kind of seeing, the young Helen through film, having seen the new film Transmission. And Kevin Hurley did a fantastic tribute to you at the Sheep Show this year. Of course, you won the did you win an award this year, or was it a recognition because of your retirement?
No,
was
Kevin and his family donated money years ago to develop an award for the Wildlife Biologist of the Year, or basically the Sheep Biologist of the Year. He forgets I'm not a biologist, but that's okay. I'll still take it. And he always takes a moment during the Sheep Show and celebrates somebody who's been working in the background. And honestly, it's a big honor. And whether I'm a biologist or a veterinarian, it doesn't particularly matter. The worst part was having to go through a bunch of pictures and try to figure out what would be appropriate for an audience and not to be there. It was really, really hard not to be there. And I know everybody celebrated without me, but I tell you, the whole pandemic thing has really put a kink in my social life.
Yeah, fair enough. And we did miss you, and it was a fantastic tribute. It was, in true Kevin Hurley fashion, it was half an hour long or 20 minutes. But it was fantastic. There was such great content. And I can tell you that our table was just glued to the screen. We listened to every word, and it was just a great tribute to you. So I guess for those of you that aren't quite as familiar with Helen, young Helen, let's talk about how you became the most influential person in wild sheep in BC, possibly the world, but certainly BC.
Oh, for God's sake. Well,
tell us how.
Totally debatable. But I grew up in Victoria. I was one of 6 kids and had a pretty independent childhood. Hung out with my brother, one of my brothers, and who's actually here loading firewood. Thank goodness. So we haven't lost that connection. And he and I hung out at the beach and rode our bikes to Mount Doug Park and dug up dinosaur bones that we found later were cows, and just had a great life. But I mostly in my personal life read. I was an avid reader, and one of the books series that I read was a bunch of books by a man by the name of Gerald Durrell, who was a super interesting conservationalist and eventually opened up a rare animal breeding facility on Jersey Island in the English Channel. So at the age of 11, I wrote him and I said, I want to be just like you. I want to travel the world and collect animals and save wildlife. And he or somebody in his office wrote me back and told me to, figure out a career and basically don't be silly. You've got lots of options. And so then I wrote other people and that I admired through articles in National Geographic and encyclopedias, and I just wanted to work with wild animals in the free world, in the greater context, and didn't really get a ton of help, but I had that ambition. As time went on, I realized that it was probably not the most practical way of getting a career. So I looked into veterinary medicine, and frankly was kind of bored with vet clinics and didn't really think I was smart enough, and it took far too long, and I wanted it now. So when I got out of high school, I wrote 50 letters to zoos across North America and got 2 replies. One was in Ontario and one was in British Columbia. So I packed up my Volkswagen and I drove to Summerland and lived in a boarding house and worked at the Okanagan Game Farm, which was sort of a zoo, but also more of a free-ranging zoo, great big exhibits with animals just allowed to breed on their own. It's not there anymore. It was built on leased Penticton Indian Band land, and that lease expired and it's gone now. But I spent 8 months shoveling just about every kind of poop that you can imagine, thing from giraffes to grizzly bears, bighorn sheep, eland, all kinds of things. And one of my jobs was to raise orphaned, well, actually not orphaned, but just raised big cats and bears that were going to be sold to other zoos or circuses. Like, this is really basic stuff, and smacks a little bit of the tiger world. Like, I wasn't exactly Carol Baskin, but I can see how that happened. And so the picture that you see of me cuddling a tiger cub was me raising a tiger cub. So I was 17. It was a dream come true. I got to hand raise moose and bighorn sheep and tigers and lions and bears. And it was pretty basic. They did not have a vet on staff. They didn't have a biologist on staff. They had just a heck of a lot of passion and quite a bit of knowledge, but they didn't have a lot of money. So I learned things sort of by trial and error, and learned you don't go in a pen with a rutting musk oxen because you're going to die. One of the sons of the owner, I came upon him one day. He was pinned to the ground by a whitetail buck that had gone for him and had his antlers pinning him to the ground, and the antlers were just like, it cleared him by inches on either side of his chest. It was incredible. So that's the kind of thing we were doing. We're just a bunch of kids taking care of these animals in any way that we could. I learned quite a bit from the owner and his staff, but I also learned I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. And I went back home when I got laid off for the winter and sat in my mother's kitchen unexpectedly and thought, this is crazy. I gotta do something. Now I'm 18, right? I'm getting old. I gotta decide on something. So I got a piece of paper and I wrote down what I wanted out of life and how I was going to get it. And I'm not usually that methodical, but I figured, okay, I guess I'm going to have to be a vet working with wild animals. That's just going to have to be it. And I'll have to borrow money and I'll just have to buckle down and get good grades. And that's what I'm going to do. So I went and worked in a vet clinic where there was, I'd known these people for quite some time and had done a little bit of volunteer work for them. And but they ended up being a super good support system for me, and applied to go back to school. And went back to University of Victoria and got prerequisites and got into vet school. When you get to vet school in 1977, you don't have much choice of what you're going to be. So there was no sort of track to wildlife or even a track to take to do horses. So you just learned everything you could. And when you said anything about wildlife, you were looked upon as somewhat fringe element. And So I just did the best I could and came out with a pretty wide education, a good education, I think, and came back to British Columbia and worked on Vancouver Island in a bunch of different practices. After about a year of that, you can butt in any time if you want.
I do have a question for you. How many women were in the program? Was there a lot of female vets in that program, Helen?
We had somewhere in the neighborhood of about 60 students in our class, and about a third of those were women. And that was unheard of then. It rapidly changed. But there was, the good old boys in the back of the room with cowboy hats from Stettler, Alberta. And some super interesting characters from other places in Western Canada, and lots of urbanites from Vancouver and Calgary and Edmonton. And the college I went to was in Saskatoon, and it accepted people from Northwest Territories, Yukon, BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. And it was a good group of people. 4 really intense years, but it prepared me in many ways, but it didn't prepare me enough for other ways too. I got bored with practice. I'll be really honest. I worked cows, horses, pigs, you name it, and dogs and cats. And after about a year of that, I wanted to do some traveling. So I packed my backpack and went to New Zealand and Australia for almost a year and just hitchhiked around and had some adventures. Some of those were involved with animals. I ended up going to a lot of farms and staying on those farms and working on them. And some of those farms led me even deeper into the idea of wildlife. I worked on a deer farm in New Zealand, and it was at the time that they had just started net gunning deer, capturing deer from the wild and putting them into captivity. So I met some of the first helicopter pilots and net gunners that ever did it, and then brought their skill set to North America. So I was pretty lucky. I got in on the ground floor and got to know some people and some techniques that have now become really commonplace in North America. When I came back to North America from traveling, I'd left my dog in my car in Saskatoon with friends. And I'd done a ton of thinking. When you're hitchhiking and you don't get picked up because there's no traffic for hours on end, you do a lot of thinking and you think about what you want to be and what you want to do. And I realized that the education I had was great, but it wasn't really what I wanted. And if I was going to get into wildlife, I was going to have to do a master's or some kind of postgraduate work. And I was lucky I had a very inspiring professor that taught me pathology at Saskatoon. Frankly, I think he still has his hands in teaching people now. And he was in his office when I got back to Saskatoon. And I walked in there and I said, Gary, how about you take me on as a master's student, because I want to do wildlife. And obviously the easiest wildlife to work on are dead ones. So let's do a pathology degree. And he said, well, what do you want to work on for a project? And I, knowing that he was really interested in fish and waterfowl, I said something bigger than a bread box, not fish, not birds. And he had just come back from a little bit of a contract doing some necropsies in the East Kootenay. There had been a die-off in the early 80s. I'm sure you guys remember that in your history books. And he had gone out and done some necropsies, and he was super interested in it. And he said, what about bighorn sheep and their respiratory disease? And I went, sure, yeah, okay, that'd be super interesting. And he said, go back to Victoria and go talk to this gentleman there who is the head of research and conservation. We actually had a division that was research and conservation in the wildlife branch in those days. And he said, his name is Don Eastman, and you should go talk to him and see if he can set you up with a project. So packed up the dog in the car, drove to Victoria, knocked on Don's door. And Don also had a strong interest in bighorn sheep. He'd done some of his postgraduate work on that. And his comment was, holy shit, a vet wants to do a master's on bighorn sheep. That's pretty cool. And he said, you know what you got to do? You got to drive to Cranbrook and you got to meet Ray DeMarshy. Well, those were the first two biologists pretty much I'd ever met. And Don is still the ultimate gentleman, a rational, calm, lovely man, very collaborative, really a fabulous mentor. And Ray's different than that. When I got to Cranbrook and went into the office, all I could hear was screaming in the background. And Ray was yelling at one of his staff members. Ray just passed away this past year. And I know everybody's got lots of memories of Ray. You guys are old enough to have met him. And he was passionate. He was highly intelligent, and he did not suffer fools. And he was ranting on about something or other. That's another story. But he became my primary biologist mentor in bighorn sheep research. And we talked a long time. We started a project, and that was my master's that went on till about, I think I finished it in 1987. So it took a little while, but ended up introducing me to the world of wild sheep.
Very cool. So I want to continue with the history, but while we're here, can you just, it's interesting, like talk about early 80s, a die-off in the Kootenays.
Mm-hmm.
History does repeat itself. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, then versus now? What did wild sheep look like now? We're all panicking, the sky is falling, and, there's all this stuff on the Fraser and the Kootenays, and, are we in better shape? Or are we in worse? Have you left the state of wild sheep in BC better than you found it, or where do we sit with that, Helen?
It'll never be the way it was in the 1920s, the 1940s, 1960s, or the 1980s. It never will be. There's too many demands on the landscape and on the wildlife that live there. The Kootenays has developed hugely, and the pressure on that landscape and that habitat is enormous. It's not just what's happened to the landscape, but it's pressure from the air, pressure from the roads, disturbance from people, access management. All of those same issues existed then, but they've been amplified probably 50-fold. Stats are not my strong point, but they've been amplified to the degree that we're never going to see it the way it was. In those days, the understanding of bighorn health was in some ways similar, but the complexities of how pneumonia occurred on the landscape and what the details are about transmission of pathogens, how the animals function when infected, and how they recover or don't recover on the landscape is far better understood now. It's been a very gradual process, and it's been challenging because, frankly, the technical and technology aspects of health have not advanced at the same rate as our demands have asked for. So what we've got is a pattern of, we've got a new bug. We've got some new technology to apply to that bug and to the animals. And here's our new theory. And that has changed, that pattern has repeated itself. And it's left us with a little bit of confusion with some of the partners that we have, including domestic sheep producers. They don't understand why we just keep changing the story a little bit. Same story, but it's just been refined a little bit more. Well, that's the case with any kind of disease process. It's the case with livestock health. It's the case with human health. And I think if people just settle down and read or listen to the story through tools like like the Mycoplasma pneumoniae film transmission, I think people can start understanding the process of understanding health. So, are we in better shape now? I think we're in better shape because I think we understand the processes better. Can we get back to the same state that wildlife were in the 60s or the 80s? I'm not sure, because I don't think we have access to the same landscape that we did then. So I'm always going to be optimistic, but I am really cognizant of the fact that there is a lot of struggles going on right now on the landscape for jobs, for resource extraction, for communities to be sustainable. And at the same time, animals and their habitats are under huge pressure. So are we going to have the same thing everywhere that we've had the luxury of access to in the past? Probably not. Will we have some access? Probably yes. But bighorn sheep, I think, are going to be on the landscape for a long time. Some of the doom and gloom that we hear now, it's been going on for decades, and we just now understand it, and we understand some of the ways to fix these problems. We don't have all the answers, but at least we have some things to try. So I think in some ways we're better, in some ways we're worse.
Great. Yeah, well said. Now, one thing I want to get back on track with kind of your history, but one thing I wanted to ask you about is you talked about understanding respiratory disease in bighorn sheep, and that was part of your master's study. Were we dealing with the same? Was it Movi back then in the 80s, or was it a different bug? You said there was different bugs throughout the years. Were we dealing with Movi back then? Do you know what we're dealing with back then?
I think we were dealing with Movi back then too. We just couldn't identify it. If you're a pathologist and you process slides from a dead sheep and you look at it microscopically, you will see the same lesions in animals that I worked on in the 80s as you see now. The pneumonia looked the same. We just didn't recognize it was mycoplasma, but the pattern is the same. We couldn't identify mycoplasma in those days, but I think I have every confidence that it was mycoplasma then too.
Okay. Okay, good. I want to talk more about disease and stuff, but let's talk a little bit more. So you finished up your master's, and then where did things evolve from there for you, Helen?
I continued being a veterinarian, doing mixed practice on Vancouver Island, and writing my thesis by hand. I didn't have a computer. So that's one of the reasons why it took quite a long time. And finally, I started putting myself out there in the world. I was really fortunate. I had really excellent collaborators for doing my master's. I joke that it was probably the cheapest master's ever done, because I had so many people offering help to me and doing lab work for nothing, or helping me in the field. I was really, really fortunate. And I should add that master's was funded by the Wild Sheep, or in those days, the Foundation for North American Wild Sheep. I don't remember how much they gave me, but they had no hesitation in funding me and were incredible supporters. I learned a really important lesson that resource users are the ones that pay for things. When I left high school, I was a card-carrying Greenpeace and Sierra Club member, and they didn't support research on wildlife. The resource users did, the miners, the foresters, and the hunters. So that was a huge shift for my head, and I've never looked back from that concept, even though I'm not a hunter myself. What did you ask me?
So just the journey of Helen. So where did you go from? So you were doing private practice. How did you end up in the government? I guess, So you ended up running wildlife as a provincial veterinarian for BC.
Yeah.
When did you end up in that channel?
Well, I started doing some consulting. wildlife veterinary consulting, and I had some really, really great gigs, primarily in the Spatsizi, collaring moose, collaring bears, collaring wolves, in the days where Spatsizi Provincial Park was supported by a group called the Spatsizi Association for Biological Research, SABR. And they had a senior biologist, Dave Hattler, who was looking for somebody to help him immobilize moose. And he called up one day. I don't know how he found me, but he said, "Can you get the drugs? I hear you're fun to work with." And I said, "I can get the drugs, and I am fun to work with." So I had several years where I would go up to Spatsizi for a couple of weeks in the fall and a couple of weeks in the spring, and do what I always wanted to do, and capture animals by helicopter, take samples, do that. And again, these collaborators that I worked with on my master's led to projects in the Yukon. I'm probably the first female to ever catch Dall's rams in the Richardsons in the Mackenzie Mountains. And we translocated a bunch of mountain goats from Kluane National Park to Jake's Corner, where the Yukon Highway hits the Dease Lake Highway, and just had some great adventures. I was really, really, really lucky. And all this time, I got occasional contracts from BC government, and one of them was a gap analysis for wildlife health. They did have a biologist at the time doing wildlife health. Her name was Laura Fries, and she worked her ass off, learning as much as she could about wildlife health. In those days, no computer. It was all paperwork. It was all memos in triplicate. And she taught herself who were the right people to talk to. They did research. She did a great job. But she wasn't a veterinarian, and she, I think, had some challenges because she didn't have that education. So I wrote this gap analysis and said, here's what I think you should do with wildlife health. And by the way, I'm a vet and I'm available. And they hired me part-time to start with. And one of the driving reasons to hire me was that at the time, Health Canada was putting some major restrictions on access to drugs for immobilization of animals. Their feeling was that only veterinarians should be drugging wildlife because they were the only ones that were trained correctly. And so a group of like-minded veterinarians and myself put together a course, a national course to be delivered to conservation officers and biologists and those that were interested in immobilizing wildlife. And that course became a standard across Canada with agencies. And I started delivering it in BC, I think in 1992, 93. And that was another real strong reason to justify hiring a veterinarian. While I was on for a few months, there was, lo and behold, a cutback. And because I had no seniority, I was removed from my position and had a really good lesson in government bureaucracy and how to justify your existence within government. And I had already developed some really good relationships with the conservation officers and some of the regional biologists, and they supported me. And after I think it was about another 6 months, they gave me a temporary assignment as a range officer, which was kind of challenging. And then eventually created an FTE and hired me full time. And that carried on until a little over a year ago. The biggest challenge for the job was telling people who I was and what I could do for them. And second biggest challenge was probably saying no, because I did everything for everyone. Anybody asked anything, I'd try to make it happen. And so it was trying to insert yourself without taking over, trying to be part of the team, adding a little bit of veterinary medicine and a little bit of health assessment into a mix where traditionally the biologists did everything on their own. And things have changed remarkably over those almost 30 years.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind, Helen, about the biology end of things and wild sheep. And what I'd like to sort of dive into is disease, Mycoplasma ovi pneumonia, and not so much about the science behind it, but the evolution of it and understanding it and kind of where we're at now. Of course, Wild Sheep Society BC, we've been involved with the Fraser River Project, and there's been some pretty significant things going on there. So there's that aspect of it. I want to talk about that. And then I also want to talk on the domestic side and the work that you're doing in the Kootenays with the new drugs that we're trying with Baytril and that treatment as well. So maybe we'll start on the wild sheep side and about, the evolution in what you've seen. Maybe we can talk a little bit about test and remove and new strategies that are being employed and what's happening with Mycoplasma in BC in the current state and the change in the past decade or several decades. Just a tiny little question.
Yeah, really. Well, for the record, the first time Mycoplasma ovi pneumoniae was ever recognized was in British Columbia during the 1999-2000 bighorn die-off that started in and around Vaso Lake. We had the luxury of a really brilliant virologist at our animal health center at the time. And we had a brilliant pathologist who had retired and was living in Enderby. And the two of those guys got together and sampled some bighorn sheep and applied a new technique called polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, to the tissues of the animals that had died and got a positive hit for a mycoplasma, which later was identified as Mycoplasma ovi pneumoniae. At the time, we thought, well, that's really interesting. We always thought there was a mycoplasma in there, but never could identify it before. And kind of put it to the side that maybe that was a really important factor. I was invited to Idaho to a meeting with the Hell's Canyon Research Group, and I mentioned that we had identified a mycoplasma and that this might be something that they could apply to their very extensive research program. And anybody who has any interest in wild sheep knows about the Hell's Canyon project and how successful they've been in identifying what's going on with Mycoplasma ovi pneumoniae. But it probably didn't start with my suggestion, but I like to think that BC played a little tiny role there too. We then, when Hell's Canyon started finding that Mycoplasma was everywhere and was a significant pathogen for baby sheep, we started looking at archived serum that we had in British Columbia from collections done in the Okanagan, done in other places where disease had become a factor in bighorn sheep. And we had some positive hits. The University of Washington in Pullman had developed a serological test, and we could go to archived serum and look for antibodies for mycoplasma. And we certainly found it in bighorn sheep that had survived the die-off in the South Okanagan. We found it in bighorn sheep that had survived a die-off in the Chasm herd near Clinton. But we really didn't have a lot of archived serum from other bighorn sheep populations. And thinhorn populations had no antibodies. Mountain goat populations had no antibodies. So we thought we were in pretty good shape. Then we started seeing some more lamb mortality on the Fraser. I consulted, or frankly, a number of us talked to a researcher from the University of Saskatchewan, and he and a grad student went to the Fraser, a subherd on the east side of the Fraser, and did some collections, found a mycoplasma. They actually were able to get a mycoplasma to grow, and it was Mycoplasma ovi pneumoniae. The grad student went back the following summer and could find nothing sick. But we knew that at least in somewhere around about 2011, I think it was, we had mycoplasma on the east side of the Fraser. So a little challenging, but every time we've had a die-off pretty much in BC since, mycoplasma has been there. Somewhere around about 2018, with the help of Wild Sheep Society of BC, Chris Proctor and his partners started a extensive sampling program on the Fraser in both Region 3 and 5, capturing animals, collaring them, and applying really intense sampling protocol that was developed as a standard by the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agency's Wild Sheep Working Group. Those guidelines detail basically a set of standard protocols and a set of standard samples to take so that you can compare health between wild sheep and goat herds. And they did that. Very expensive project, but what it did was highlight the fact that mycoplasma was present in multiple populations on the Fraser. We don't know if that mycoplasma is the same one that was there in the mid 2000s, but there was evidence of mycoplasma. So the question was, what do we do about it? And again, fortunately, we have colleagues in the US that we could learn from, and they started applying techniques to clear their populations of mycoplasma in the Hells Canyon metapopulation. And what they went ahead and did was, because they have such an intensive research program, they would be sampling animals on a regular basis, the same animals over and over again. And they decided that if those animals were sampled and were mycoplasma positive for at least 2 out of 3 sampling sessions, they would be removed. And their removal techniques are often live animal removal. Those animals are placed into a research facility so more can be learned from them. And some of that is just simply because they're able to do that. They have access to those kind of facilities. In speaking to the group in British Columbia that was interested in treating these herds, we didn't feel that was something we could do. Area is just too remote. We have no way of removing live animals and holding them. And the idea of being able to test them more than once, more than twice, is pretty difficult, just simply because it's too hard to do. It's too remote. It's too challenging for those animals, and frankly, it's too risky for everybody. At about the same time, there were researchers in the U.S. working with a new model of PCR testing, where the PCR testing could be done in the field, and there was some research postgraduate researchers working on these machines. The company's name is Biomeme, and these portable PCR units are not cheap, very expensive, but they were holding some real promise that this was something that you could do in the field and make a decision about removing animals right away if they were clearly positive. So the Wild Sheep Society and the Wild Sheep Foundation both purchased units for wildlife health for the Fraser project. And for the first time, we were able to test animals in the field and remove them because they were mycoplasma positive. The reason for the removal is that even though those animals have survived being infected with Mycoplasma pneumoniae, and they may actually look reasonably healthy, if they're carrying this bacteria in their nasal sinuses, they can shed it. They can shed it to other animals that they're in close contact with, but most importantly, they can shed it to newborn lambs that have no immunity to pretty much anything. And the pattern that's seen with Mycoplasma pneumoniae infected bighorn sheep herds is that lambs are born, but by the time they're 6 to 8 weeks of age, they're dead. They do not survive. And that is because their mothers or other ewes that are present in their maternal groups are shedding the bacteria, they pick it up, and they have no way to fight it off. So the idea of removing infected ewes is to support the production and the survival of newborn lambs. So we were very anxious about this project. And I didn't do all the legwork whatsoever. Chris Proctor and Fran Iredale and others spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people. Wild Sheep Society members and volunteers spent a lot of time fundraising and also talking to a lot of people. And the research design was developed so that a herd of sheep that had zero lamb production or zero lamb survival for 2 years in a row was to be captured and sampled in the field. That field sampling would result in either the animals being released from the field or removed, euthanized on site. Sorry about that. The husband walked through. Anyway. With any luck, the dog won't walk through too. So our first year was just when COVID hit. It was really an interesting session. We had a ton of people in the field. We had a wall tent set up. It was cold. It was windy. We had animals brought to a central processing site where we'd sample them. And then Sherry Wilmot, my research biologist or wildlife health biologist, would run the samples with the portable PCR. We hadn't used it before. It hadn't been used in that kind of a field setting before. We actually got really anxious about it and did a satellite phone call to the company that manufactures it, tried to get some of their help to clarify what we were doing wrong, what we were doing right. All this time, the animals that we were sampling were sedated, and they had to be sedated for up to, over an hour in some cases. So we had people sitting with the sheep. And this is all really well visualized in the film transmission, what it took. When we got a clear positive, I would come out of the tent and walk up to the animal and say, "I'm sorry, this animal's positive. We're going to be removing it." And I would kill it on site, necropsy it, sample it. If the animal was negative, we'd release it on site, give it a reversal agent, and reverse it. Very controversial. Not appetizing to many of the people that were on site, including First Nations that were solidly behind us, but not happy about killing animals that appeared to be healthy. We discussed it a lot on site, and that this was for the good of the population. And I'm happy to say that after that first year, we didn't have to do it the same way again. We didn't hold animals sedated, partly because of COVID, because we couldn't have that kind of a group together again. But we also, I think, have modified it to a way that works better for us and certainly works better for the laboratory procedures. We get a better, clearer reading. We can be a lot more confident about the results. But that first year was quite a rush. It was pretty intense, and I got to hand it to the group that were there. They handled it beautifully. When things went south, when people were unhappy, we discussed it, we explained it, and they were awesome. Just the best bunch of people you could ever ask to work with. The results of that first year were amazing. That herd of somewhere around about 50 ewes had not had a lamb survive for 2 years previously. Nobody'd seen one past the summer. And in the following year, there was 25 lambs, so 50% survival, which is pretty much unheard of in British Columbia anyway. It's certainly possible on the landscape with good nutrition and reasonable numbers of predators to get that kind of numbers, but we hadn't seen that for years and years and years. So we went back and captured some of those yearlings, and they were sampled. They were not carrying Mycoplasma ovinemoniae and had no antibodies indicating that they'd been exposed to it. So we felt like that was an incredible success story. I can't really give you numbers of the following years right now, but suffice to say that such an incredible effort, such an expensive effort, has actually resulted in better survival, better health, and that particular project is ongoing, as y'all know, and will be continuing probably for the next 5 years as we work our way up the Fraser towards the junction and learn a little bit more about wild sheep health up there.
So, Helen, we've seen this lamb recruitment, and of course, this is being done in stages. So every year, an area goes out and gets completed. Based on your preliminary and results and what you're seeing, are you confident that we're going to see numbers increasing in the Fraser River ecosystem? Or are you're speculative, or I know you're always heavy on the science side, so you're going to look at data. But how do you feel? Like, what's your gut feeling from what you're seeing? Is this really encouraging?
I wish we'd done it 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Some of the subgroups that we worked on this year are really low in number, and were really heavily affected. So I think there's going to be some subgroups that are going to wink out just because we haven't got to them soon enough. So some of those populations are probably going to need some supplemental animals. So we may get into the business of doing translocations again, and that's going to have to be done very, very carefully so that we don't make the situation worse. But I think this is the answer for the Fraser. I think we will get some really good populations going again if we can combine the health work with habitat work and other types of protections. I think this is going to be a domino effect that we will see results, and that will feed into more support, more funding, and more sheep. I'm pretty confident of it, but I am worried about some of these little subgroups that, have really interesting migration patterns, or, have been there forever, but they're just not doing very well. And this is a pretty aggressive management tool. It may not make that much difference for some of those ones. So I think we'll have to use some other tools to bolster the resiliency of some of those littler populations.
Yeah. So for our listeners, I guess, and you back me up on this, but I think, at its peak, the Fraser River ecosystem was around that 2,500 mark for numbers, and we've seen it down to roughly 800 is where it was in the last few years. So I guess the end goal would be a carrying capacity in that 2,000 to 3,000 range, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the Fraser River population has gone up and down and probably has had a number of different disease events that we don't know about, but some we do know about. I've been some of the historical stories about areas like Churn Creek, where gold miners brought in large flocks of domestic sheep, probably resulted in disease transmission to bighorn sheep in those areas decades and decades ago. So, maybe we have some residual holdovers that where animals or animal populations just don't do that well because there's been too much impact on their health. We were pretty aggressive about removing portions of some of those herds at Big Bar and at the junction for translocation projects into the U.S. It helped the U.S. out a huge amount, and whether we were lucky or not, those populations didn't appear to have health challenges and certainly didn't appear to carry mycoplasma. But it did hit, I think, our populations pretty hard, and probably took a little bit of a time to recover from removing a bunch of really good, healthy ewes. So, maybe we did some negatives towards some of those populations in the past, and it's time to support them and try to learn a little bit more about them. I really do have some optimism, and I think with the participation of groups like Wild Sheep Society and the First Nations that are highly interested in sustainable sheep populations again, I do think we have a lot of promise, a lot of good things to come.
Awesome. I love hearing that, and it's such an exciting project to be part of. So I think we're in year 3 or 4 right now of that Fraser River project, and I know you were a big part of making it happen and a big part of the execution, and you were on the landscape again in February, March this year as well. Is this ongoing for you? You recently retired from government as the provincial wildlife veterinarian. Are you continuing your work? Will you be out there next year? What does that look like? Are you contracting to them? How does that work, Helen?
Retirement cold turkey would have been really hard for me. There were a lot of projects that I was pretty passionate about that I couldn't put the time and energy into when I was a full-time employee of the government. So retirement is allowing me to pick and choose. And for me, wild sheep will always have a high priority. Wild sheep have been really good to me, and I want to give back to them. So I will continue working in this project as I'm invited to, as a contractor, as a volunteer, any way that I can. So I hope that continues, but I can't predict what budgets and, maybe somebody's going to get tired of me eventually yelling at them. So, but I'd like to continue working with it.
Excellent. So you talked about retirement now and not going cold turkey. So obviously we know your involvement in the Fraser River project. Is there other projects you're involved in across the province? Is it other sheep projects, other non-sheep projects? What does that look like for you?
Well, I continue supporting the BC Sheep Separation Program. And I have been working with that particular program and some research efforts with domestic sheep to develop a protocol to clear domestic sheep flocks of Mycoplasma ovipneumoniae. You referred to that earlier, and part of that research has involved applying a protocol that was developed by researchers in the US to small flocks. We have 2 flocks currently that we have had treated using an antibiotic protocol. And we've had mixed success. We have had success, but not 100%. And we're currently working up a paper to publish where we detail what exactly we did, what exactly our success was, and what exactly our recommendations are. And in both of these flocks, Mycoplasma ovipneumoniae behave differently than it does with the average domestic sheep. It caused significant health challenges to both flocks, to the point that the producers, the owners, asked for help through the Wild Sheep Society of BC. Not through veterinarians weren't able to help them. They came to Wild Sheep Society, and the Wild Sheep Society has funded this research 100% of the way. And we have had some success, as I said, but we are also really emphasizing the fact that there are some management tools that we have to apply at the same time, that the drug's not going to do it all by itself. There are animals that are going to have to be culled. There are animals and biosecurity rules that have to be followed. And there are a lot of educational tools to have to apply to farming sheep, just like farming bighorn sheep, if we want to be successful in keeping everything healthy. We still are, we're in the middle of a kind of morphing the domestic wild separation, sheep separation project or program into something a little different, where we're working with a producer, domestic sheep producer, to do some significant outreach in the East Kootenay, and making it worth their while to understand more about Mycoplasma ovonemoniae, perhaps going as far as testing their flock, and perhaps encouraging them to keep their flocks Mycoplasma ovonemoniae free. That is really hoped that it can become part of health management of domestic sheep, just like we're hoping it becomes part of managing wild sheep populations. That Mycoplasma ovonemoniae does impact your bottom line, whether you're breeding bighorns or domestic sheep, and it can be managed just like any other infectious disease. So that's an interesting road to travel, and we're not 100% sure how we're going to get there, but we're doing as much education as possible. Again, a plug for the transmission film. We think that it is a really good overview of the issue for certain domestic sheep producers, and that it can be successful, can be successfully managed, as opposed to 100% treated. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's a pretty complicated topic. But yeah, I'm going to continue doing that. I do have some other contracts that I'm doing for government and for NGOs, but I'm probably going to scale back a little bit and just focus mostly on sheep.
Fantastic. Well, we're grateful for that. Thank you, Helen. And you've always been such a huge help to us and such a great support. And we're just so grateful for what you do for wild sheep, and then the support you've given the Wild Sheep Society of BC. I just can't say enough about what you do. So now, one thing I wanted to touch on was, and I know you're retired from government and very respectful. How do you feel about talking a little bit about policy? Ag has been doing their part. They've been at the table supporting us, trying to work through this. But really, at the end of the day, there's not really much coming out from policy yet from the Ministry of Ag when it comes to domestic sheep separation and wild sheep separation. We've seen the control order in the Yukon, which was a very big thing and would have a pretty significant effect here in BC. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but if you want to talk about it being retired, I'd love to hear from you on it. So.
There have been a number of times in my career that we have gone to Ministry of Agriculture in whatever iteration it was and asked for their help, and we have never had any support from them, other than the Animal Health Center and laboratory diagnostics, et cetera. And they've been awesome. But in terms of policy, in terms of taking this particular organism seriously, nothing at all. In fact, there was a lot of opposition that it was even a serious issue for wild sheep. I think that's changed, especially in the last couple of years. There was a minister's strategic working group that was an extremely challenging project to manage, and Ministry of Agriculture assigned a senior level bureaucrat to manage us, and she did that exquisitely well and continues to support us. The minister has agreed with the recommendations from that working group, advisory group, I should say, and but we, over the last couple of months, have had it stalled in terms of next steps and who's doing what and decision notes, etc. And that is incredibly frustrating. It feels like, here we go again, beating your head against a brick wall. And I have optimism that we just have to be patient, that some bricks need to be aligned, maybe not bricks, but pavers have to be aligned correctly, and this will continue to proceed. I think we have developed a good enough relationship that we do have access to people, the agriculture minister, who can make this happen. But the policy piece is super, super important. We will never get a control order like Yukon did. We have too big an industry here. It wouldn't work. It would be too large and expensive, too many implications from delivering an order like that. But there are things that can be done that have been recommended and have been agreed upon, and those must be done. I think agitating from the outside is helpful, but the people we have in staff positions in government right now have the skill set to be able to deliver this. It's just getting the bureaucrats to agree to take it seriously that is the challenge right now. And I'm not quite sure what the holdup is, but I'm really I'm hopeful that at least we can get a few things delivered that can protect thin horns, that can really do a good job of buffering sensitive populations in high risk of contact areas. I think education is a big thing, and if we continue this grinding process of educating people with tools like the film, with outreach to 4-H, with private screenings of the film, with First Nations coming on board, and they are in a big way. I think we can get there, but we have to apply the pressure. We have to continue that pressure on agriculture as well as my ex-ministry to take it seriously, to keep it in the spotlight. Wild Sheep Society can do that.
Oh, we appreciate that, Helen. That's sage advice for us to keep up the good fight, and our members keep doing their thing and reaching out to everyone and trying to do the right thing for wild sheep. But it's tough, and it's been, have you seen much of a change? You've been in it now for 20 plus years. Have you seen much of a change on the landscape? Have you, what are your thoughts on it overall and what you've seen throughout your entire career?
Well, what I have seen over the last couple of years is domestic producers getting it and wanting to help and recognizing that it is an issue, and they don't want to be part of the problem. They want to be part of the solution. And we have some really amazing leaders and leadership, but we're still plugging away at other people who get into the sheep industry without any education, without any knowledge at all, and don't think that they are part of the problem. So I think the education piece is critical. If people don't know that it's an issue, they're not going to understand, and they're not going to want to help. They're not going to want to prevent it from becoming a problem. So educating people, being on the same page, not pointing fingers, but helping people do the right thing, I think is really the best way to approach this. Every time we come up with a problem and we get aggressive about it and point fingers, we're not doing anybody any favors at all. It's working together that really makes a difference.
Well said. Well, Helen, we've taken over an hour of your day, and there's still another hour of content, and we just got to have you back. So we appreciate you taking the time, but honestly, I'd love to have you back, and maybe, I know you're going to be busy this summer, but we get back in the fall and we start chatting a bit more, and there's a whole bunch of other issues around wild sheep we'd love to chat about. We know, like, mycoplasma is a big part of it, but there's other diseases and a whole host of other issues that wild sheep deal with as well. And this is kind of in the forefront, but we also know that it's much bigger than mycoplasma ovi pneumonia as well. So, but I want to thank you personally for everything that you've done for wild sheep in British Columbia, first and foremost, and then just the support you've given the Wild Sheep Society BC. Anytime that you're involved, it just makes me happy because I know that we're doing good things for wild sheep, and I'm so thankful for your work.
Well, Kyle, you're more than welcome. We are not individuals. We're the team, and we all believe in the same thing. We have the same vision, and I'm not the expert. I just been around a long time, so I appreciate what Wild Sheep Society does. You guys rock. I mean, we
Likewise.
rock because I'm part of it.
You are. It makes me so happy when I see your name as a member. It's just, yeah, it's gratifying. So thank you, Helen. I want to wish you good luck with the rest of your lambing. I know you got 3 lambs to get on the ground, and I'm hoping we'll see you this weekend so go out there and, I don't know, what do you give them curry or something to make them go into lambing or something? You make it happen, because we need you in Whitehorse for the Thin Horn Summit this year.
Maybe I'll just be late. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah.
I've helped with lambing with my family in Scotland. You basically stand there and yell at them for doing it wrong and then assist where needed.
Yeah, exactly. But I would be in supreme shit if I wasn't here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Helen. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully we can do it again this fall. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us.
Okay, guys. Take care.